to week one of our Castaway series. I'm coming to you right now from Sanibel Island. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. And I thought it was a perfect location to talk about the series Castaway. Hopefully you've seen the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks. And you know that his plane was over the ocean, it explodes. He survives the plane crash and finds himself on an island, alone, left alone to solve the problems, to survive. And the only friend he has in that entire situation is the most famous volleyball of all times. And of course that is Wilson. I love that movie. But what we're going to be talking about in this series is that the truth is that in life we will find ourselves at times where we might feel alone. We may find ourselves in situations where we are very anxious, where we have great worries, where life has carried us to places where we feel we're alone and that there's nobody that is there to help us or to care for us. But we're going to take a look at our key scripture today, which is 1 Peter verses 5 and 7, chapter 5, verse 7. And what you're going to see is that Peter tells us that God cares for us. No matter where we are, no matter what situation, no matter how alone we feel, that we can take our cares and our burdens to Him and that He cares for us. So take a second and read that scripture, and then we'll dive into this Bible study. Point number one says, I my anxieties. And I love this verse, Psalms 139:23. It says, search me, O God, and know my heart, test me, and know my anxious thoughts. The truth is, I've grown up in church my entire life. And there's one thing that I always hate about a lot of us Christians and with Christianity is that we like to pretend like there's nothing wrong. We like to pretend that everything is always perfect. And the truth is, according to what Peter told us earlier and what we're reading here in Psalms, is that if we live and breathe, we are going to have anxiety. We're going to have things that are going to make us uncomfortable, uneasy. But what Psalms is telling us here is that we need to go to God and we need to admit, hey, I have a problem. God, this is my issue. This is a burden. This is something that is larger, greater than I can handle, that I can carry on my own, and give it to Him and allow Him to handle it. So right now, if you're doing this as a group, if you don't mind, if you feel comfortable, take a second and discuss the things in life that make you most anxious, the things that make you worry the most. If you're doing this by yourself, do exactly what Psalm says. Go to God right now and tell Him the things that make you most anxious, the things that you are most worried about, and ask Him to help you deal with those. Point number two says, focus on my Father. You see, a lot of times when we find ourselves in situations where we're struggling and we're anxious, we are surrounded by that problem, we are overwhelmed, we are overcome by that problem. That is the only thing that we can see. It is all that we can focus on is the problem. But when we read this verse in Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 through 26, we see that He says that if the birds don't worry about what they're going to eat, why do you? It says that your Father says that you are much more valuable than those birds. So if we can take a second and lift our eyes, look up, take our eyes off the problem and focus on God, that is where our help will come from. If you will, right now in your groups, or if you're doing this alone, take a second right now. Maybe you've not done this. Maybe you've been carrying this burden this whole time. Take a second and stop right now as a group and pray, or individually. pray and take your focus off God. Another thing that I do to take my focus off the problem and on God is I begin to sing God's praises. I'll put on my favorite praise and worship song and I sing, or I'll pull out my guitar and I sing. And in that time, I'm able to take my eyes off of the problem and focus on God, because He is where my help comes from. Take a second right now. Maybe stop and put on the praise and worship CD as a group and sing together. Take your mind off of the problems. Or if you're, just stop and just pray and focus on God for a moment. Point number 3 says, take the trade. And we're going to look at Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30, where He says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will, what? He says, I will give you rest. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Do you know that is one of the hardest things for me to do? It is to truly take my issue to God and leave it. He says that take your problems to Him and take His rest, because His burden is easy and His burden is light. My problem is this. I'll go to God like we did just a minute ago, and I'll pray, I'll sing, but then by the end of the day, I've turned around and I've picked that problem right back up and I've started carrying it again. I didn't really give it to Him. So right now in your groups, take some time, or if you're doing this alone, take some time, go back, lay it at His feet, and exchange. Make the exchange. Receive the peace, receive the comfort, receive the lighter burden that God has for us, versus carrying the heavy weight around. And point number 4 finally says, celebrate tomorrow's victory. Psalms 27 verses 13 through 14 says, I would have despaired unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Yes, wait for the Lord. Man, that is such a tough thing to do, to wait on the Lord. But God has promised us that the end is going to be good. He has promised us that the victory has already been won and that the end is going to be good. And we have to rejoice in what the future will be. He's promised us, and He will not fail on His promises. And in the end, the victory will be good. Do me a favor, if you can today. No matter how strong, no matter how deep your problems are, take time right now and thank God for the promise of victory. Thank God that He will never leave us, He will never forsake us, He will always be there for us. It says that if we cast our burdens on Him, because He cares for us. Let's thank Him and give Him praise that He cares for us right now in the midst of whatever situations that we're in. Our hope and our prayers that through this series you will realize that no matter what you go through in life, you are never alone and that God is with you.